Hi there, my name is Andy Farquharson and I'm your host on Alternative Exit,
the podcast dedicated to educating small business owners about the possibilities, benefits and challenges of transitioning to an employee ownership model. Did you know that there are over 200 million SMEs around the globe with an owner that will be retiring within the next 10 years? Many of these owners will never actually find a buyer for their business, forcing them to close their doors, wreaking havoc on their employees and the communities. There is an alternative. This show will explore different forms of employee ownership and the best practices for a successful transition. Each episode is going to feature interviews with experts on employee ownership, business owners who've successfully made the transition, and consultants who've helped facilitate these changes.
Okay, now let's get on with the show. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of The Alternative Exit. Today's guest is Juho Makkonen. He is the co-founder and CEO of a company here in Finland called Sharetribe. It's a pioneering platform that now enables anyone to build their own online marketplace. But the really exciting part for all your listeners is that in 2018, Juho actually led Sharetribe's transition to a steward ownership model. Now, we're going to learn a little bit more about that later, but basically it's a structure designed to allow long-term purpose, democratic governance, and sustainable investment moving forward. And so this innovative approach sort of aligns with the platform he and the team there are building, where they're trying to reimagine capitalism and help build a platform and businesses for good. So, Juho, welcome to The Alternative Exit.
Thanks, Andy, for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, mate, it's awesome. So we're going to dive into Sharetribe and the journey you've been on first. But like for listeners of the podcast, steward ownership is a new term. So I'd love it if you could please explain what is steward ownership.
Yeah, sure. It's a new term that describes a really old phenomenon, which basically, I think there are really two core principles. So one of the principles is that the companies should be oriented towards a purpose. So basically, profits are a means to an end. And so this is in common with social enterprise and things like that. And then there's the other, which is that the company should be self-owned and governed, which basically means that it should not be governed by outside investors. It should be governed by the people who are actually doing the work. So that would be the two principles, and then everything else stems from that.
Okay, fantastic. So we'll dive in a little bit more. I think in terms of those two elements, they're going to come to light as we start talking more about your story and sort of the journey you've been with Sharetribe. But I mean, great if you could just start with the origin story of your company and whether, because you obviously didn't start as a steward-owned business. So yeah, if you could just talk us through that, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. We started the business back in 2011 with my co-founder Antti and third co-founder Niklas, and at the time, our initial vision was actually to build a marketplace of our own. And we did that for the first 2 years, and that wasn't really getting the traction we hoped. And along the way, we realized that there was an even bigger need. So there were all these people reaching out to us, asking if they can use our technology to build their own platform. So this was the time when this sharing economy was becoming a big thing. So they would ask, hey, can I build Airbnb for surfboards or Uber for walking dogs? And at some point we realized there isn't really a software solution to meet this demand from these founders, and that we decided that we are going to cater for that, and we are going to build one. From the very beginning, the whole reason for starting the company for us, we thought that, okay, this is going to be something that is beneficial for the world. So the idea of the sharing economy, we felt that this is great. It has environmental benefit, is economic benefit, social benefit. So we are going to do basically we hope that we are able to pay ourselves salary while working on things that we believe are beneficial for the society. So that was the motivation. So that is very much this social enterprise ethos, and that's then how it came about. And originally we just thought that, okay, our profits and purpose are perfectly aligned. We're going to be doing some good things. The more of those we do, the more profit we make, the also more impact, more positive impact we have. So nothing more to that. So we started with a traditional startup structure.
Okay. Well, you say traditional startup structure, but there's not many startups have that ethos, right? And they're trying to link that social enterprise with their growth. And sometimes, I mean, for a lot of startups, that's constrained by their cap table. Who owns them? So were you guys just bootstrapped?
Yeah, so we were bootstrapped in the very beginning, but at some point we also did onboard investors. So two like investment funds joined our journey in 2013, 2014. And at that time, we explained to them that, we had this thing in our articles of association already that, okay, our company doesn't exist only to like generate profits for the shareholders, but also to really like make positive impact for the world. And they said, okay, well, that we are fine with that as long as it also generates those profits. But it didn't have like any more specific clauses on what exactly that means in terms of profit distribution or anything like that. So it was just like a statement there in the articles of association that wouldn't really dictate any practical decisions.
How were those conversations at the time with those investors? Because I'm sure that it sounds like you would have been really forthcoming with that at the front, so they didn't get a surprise when they read that articles as an association. But still, like it's even back in 2014, it would have created some. I'm sure it would have created some friction in the process.
Yeah, so that just having that step in the articles of association, that wasn't really like a source of friction from their perspective. Was that okay? It's great that founders are motivated. Like I think that if you ever watch Silicon Valley, you know that every founder there says we are just trying to build make the world a better place. So that ultimately this is something that every startup say that okay, this is just like one of two more founders trying to do the same. So not only they don't have a problem with that.
Little did they know, Juho, that you'd be actually taking it a step further than most startup founders in a few years later. So if you could, it'd be great to now, like, I'd love for you to frame a little bit now as what, under the steward ownership banner, like what is the purpose that's aligning Sharetribe, and then the journey that you guys took to get there?
Sure. So it really like all began with purpose. Like purpose came first, and then after that we realized that this is the structure that we need to adopt. The original purpose or original mission, as we defined by me and Antti, was that okay, we want to help the whole world share. That was the thing. Like sharing economy is great. We just want to facilitate the creation of more of these platforms like Airbnb and like Uber and so on. And then at some point, we started looking at these big platforms. They would be getting bigger. They would raise tons of venture capital. Eventually, they would go public. And we started wondering, like, are they really purely positive forces for the society? And we started seeing that, okay, lots of cities, for example, are actually battling with Airbnb and Uber, and they are trying to bend the rules. And there are all kinds of things that actually are in conflict with their original purpose. For example, if you imagine Airbnb's original purpose was, okay, there should be less hotels. We don't need as many hotels because we can use the spare apartments and spare rooms. And now what actually ended up happening is that the landlords would convert their rental apartments into vacation rentals and push people into suburbs, which is completely contrary to the original mission. And same for Uber. The original thing was there should be less cars on the road. And it actually, studies showed that actually there are now more cars on the road because like drivers are just circulating, like looking for the next ride. So it just, economists would say that these companies would generate these externalities that were not really in line with the original mission. And because these companies at this point, they were venture capital funded, they would go public, they had this strong incentive to prioritize profit generation above all else. And the problem with that was that then actually their work ended up being detrimental and even harmful for the original mission. And what we then felt that, okay, there should be like a better way. And our purpose became, okay, we want to democratize this platform economy. We want to prevent this situation where we just have this couple of Death Star giant platforms, that are just sucking the life out of all the world's transactions. And we hope that people can vote with their feet. If they don't like the rules of the giant platforms, they should have the technology to start their own. Maybe we would have Uber in Helsinki owned by the drivers, and we would have like an SMB or a social enterprise or different forms of organizations, this kind of like a plurality in the platform economy. And that's what we really wanted to achieve. And then we would go to various events and conferences and talk to various people. Hey, this is what we are gonna help you. This is our mission, and this is what we want to do. And they respond, but okay, but what prevents you from becoming one of them. You are you have venture capital investors. You are if you come into this dominant position, you are owning the the platform that ultimately powers all these platforms. So aren't you going to be the next extractive giant that is actually like soon going to be doing something that is harmful for the original mission? And that was kind of like the challenge for us at the time, that okay, well, we don't really have a good answer. We can say no, we would never do that, but like, is that really credible when you don't have anything to back it up?
Yeah, absolutely. So it really sort of came from a desire to be true to your brand image, right? Be true to what you're saying out there in the world. Okay, which is very cool, very exciting, and I think as sort of alluded to at the start, not something I see many founders looking to take the next step with. I mean, you talked about sort of a couple of those larger behemoths that have compromised those initial early principles and not managed to find a way. So, mate, what was that journey like for you guys to find that structure that was going to work well?
Yes, it started from an accident, as these usually happen. So my co-founder Antti attended Burning Man, and then after Burning Man, he was at an event facilitated by a common friend, Neil Gorenfellow from Shareable magazine, which was like a really influential magazine on the sharing economy at the time. And in the middle of the night, Antti was having some beers with other people at the kitchen, and he started talking to the person next to him. And, oh yeah, what do you do? And what do you do? And then it turned out that he was working on this concept of steward ownership. So he was part of this group that had been studying this phenomenon and then coining this new term to describe like a way that could disrupt like how organizations are going to be governed and structured officially. And that's where the original spark kind of like became. So then we started studying this thing more. Okay, what is this thing really? And we realized that those principles and that those governing principles were exactly the type of things that we wanted to see. At that point, we realized that we don't want the traditional exit. So we are not interested in selling the company. We are not interested in going public. We want to build something that is long-lasting, independent, and always focused on its mission, like doing something beneficial for the world, and that its profits should be merely a means for achieving that mission. And so we felt that, okay, this sounds good. Like this structure is a way for us to enforce that our company will always remain that way.
So, I mean, you obviously identified this purpose, like this purpose-driven vehicle, steward ownership. And we'll go into a little bit more of the conversations of the practicalities of how that happens. But how are those conversations with your investors?
Yes. So we went to them and we told them that, okay, this is the plan. Now we know what we want to do. And they told us no. that you should not do that. Like, of course, like the reality is that they were like, one of them was like a VC fund that has limited partners. And they had made a certain promise to their limited partners that, okay, they are only investing in companies where they can expect like an exit in a traditional form, and there's a potential for 100x plus return. And now we were essentially telling that, okay, it's not going to work like that. We can offer you like a 5x, maybe 10x return eventually from our profits, but it's going to be capped, and it won't come in the form of company sale or an IPO or something like that. And naturally, that was something that, okay, well, it's not a surprise that their answer would be that this is not what we signed up for, because they really didn't. That was also not something that we had thought of originally. We had just like recognized that over the years after the investment happened.
Okay. So, what can you share about the process of getting them across the line to support the next stage of investigating this transaction?
Yeah, I think it really helped that we were at a stage of our company where we had not been. So first of all, we were not in a unicorn trajectory. We were growing slowly but steadily, but it didn't really seem to them that, okay, this company will anyway be worth like 1 billion. So that was like one thing.
You weren't their golden ticket in the fund.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So that was one aspect of that. Other aspect was that we still had the majority of the shares, and then we told them that, okay, like if we are not able to transition, then we will just keep the company independent, because we, as founders, we still control the majority. Then we just don't raise any more money, and then we are just going to remain independent. it would be better if we can transition, but like we can achieve the same thing also like without that. So, which of course it was not a super great and nice feeling to have like to give this kind of like an ultimatum, but that was also the reality. We knew that we are not gonna we would not enter into a situation where the company would be majority owned by investors, because that is the situation where the problems start to emerge if the company more than 50% of the voting power is really controlled by investors. If that would have been the case for us, it would have been a very different type of negotiation, and I'm not sure what the outcome would have been. Maybe probably I would not be with the company anymore. But that was the leverage we had. So these were the two leverage points, and then we ended up agreeing that, okay, what if we raise some money with this new model and from investors who are aligned with these new incentives that we have. So who basically want the same thing than us and who are happy to get their returns from our profits. And we are going to use some of that to buy your shares back. And then we agreed that, okay, we are going to buy your shares back with like a small profit. And then we are going to use raise some money and like do that, and then that in this way we can offer you like an exit, and then you can invest those money back into companies that are better fit for your model. And that was a really important thing there. That okay, so there was an incentive for them to allow the transition.
Yeah, totally. We'll dive as we're sort of thinking about like the two elements that you talked about for steward ownership. I mean, the company has a purpose. And that sort of it's self-governed. Now, they're obviously very, very much aligned with sort of employee-owned businesses like that they've got. But as you're in steward-owned businesses, you can obviously design and align what that purpose is before you think about those self-governance principles. So where did you, I mean, you've talked a little bit more about your mission. Like when you sort of define that, put that into the purpose of the business, what was that?
Yeah, and so that was already so it basically went through these two iterations where we started with this different defined by me and Antti, where the mission was really all about like making the whole world share. And then in like a whole company session, we were basically on a retreat, and then we would workshop together, and we would come about like, okay, and then the mission became like democratize platform ownership, and that democratized platform ownership is basically what now like then centralizes the mission that we really wanted to see. That okay, this is really the thing. It should be democratic about platforms and about ownership, not just access, but ownership. And that then, so this already happened in 2015, so 3 years before the transition. And then from that, when we had that mission, then these events started happening that eventually led to the transition. And that's then what we wrote in our articles of association as the very first item, that the purpose of this company is to democratize platform ownership.
And as you're thinking about those articles of association, because a steward-owned business is not like a legal entity, a legal sort of form of business structure here in Finland. So how have you managed to bring those into the more traditional limited liability structure?
Yeah, there were some really interesting things there. Luckily, we were working with the folks from the Purpose Foundation, who are the people developing the steward ownership concept, and they had not worked with a Finnish company before, but they had lots of experience from other European jurisdictions, Germany in particular, where this thing is already a lot bigger. So they offered us like a template that, hey, here's a basis that you can use. And naturally, we needed to then work with our lawyers to modify certain things. But the core thing really is that you need to separate the voting power and the rights for profits. And you do that by different share classes. So right now, we basically have 4 different classes of shares. So one is where we have shares that don't have any rights for companies' profits, but they have voting power, and they are for employees. And then we have a different type of share that these are for investors, and they don't have any voting power. And how it works is that the company, when the investors buy them originally for 20 euros, and then the company is bound to use 40% of its profits annually to buy them back with a set price. In this case of the one funding round that we've done, we agreed that, okay, we're going to use a 5x like a return. So we're going to buy them back for 100 euros. So eventually the investors will get like a 5x return for the investment.
And did you talk about any timelines for that?
Yes. So the target was that, okay, we strive to do this within 10 years. If you don't manage that, then after that, we would need to use 100% of our profits for this buyback. So that there's a bit of pressure. Right now, I'd say that we are we are a bit behind on that. I'm hoping right now that we are going to be managing to return every investor at least what they originally invested, and maybe 2-3 years more before they've gotten the whole sum. So the original strategy at that point, there are a couple of twists and turns, and like, well, as it usually goes with startups, the original growth projection doesn't always exactly match the reality, but I still think that we are on track to provide them a really good return, just maybe 2-3 years later than the original schedule.
Well, look, you're definitely not alone in being an investment vehicle in this current market that's giving people a slight delay to the projected returns. So there's so many amazing avenues to go, but like I'd love to talk a little bit more about the self-governance and employee engagement. I mean, it sounds as though that was something that, like, when you talk about your story about going away to a company retreat and actually figuring out like what is your purpose going to be like for the steward ownership structure, like you're already engaged like in a more democratic style of leadership. How has that come to, well, what has changed in the steward ownership model and what does it look like today?
If you think about like the very practical governance of like how decisions are made at the company, I don't think that anything changed. Like already before the transition, we had really adopted a model that, well, some companies today talk about self-management or even teal. Some use a word called co-leadership. But anyway, the idea is that instead of like building the traditional pyramid hierarchy, you have like a kind of like a network of individual contributors who come together and work together and use various decision-making mechanisms to kind of like make a decision together. And we had been using such mechanisms to various degree already before 2018, and we have continued to use them today. So I think that the voting power is ultimately the last resort. I think that if we do our job well, we will never ever end up having a vote. We have never had any so far. I don't hope that we will never ever. But I think it's very important that if that day will come, then we have the structure in place that ensures that the people who are going to be deciding are fully aligned with the mission that we have.
So in your decentralized model of decision making, you said voting to the power is the last resort. And so how do you guys approach things like, I mean, annual planning and utilizing that to better inform those investors and what their plan or what their return profile looks like?
So for example, in case of like annual planning, we have a strategy process, which essentially, so I am in a role of like a strategy facilitator in our company, which basically means that I am usually the one who triggers in motion that, hey, I'm seeing these things, I think we should be doing this. And then I initiate an initial proposal, then there will be some discussion. And then sometimes other people say, no, that doesn't make any sense and we should do this thing instead. And then like a various processing, we have this open meeting that everybody can join, that is on a weekly basis, and it only happens if there's some agenda. This is usually where this is brought. Then anybody who is interested in our strategy process can join. We discuss together. Sometimes we decide, okay, now we need to have more work on this. So let's set up a task force consisting of, let's say, these 3 to 4 people, and they will work on the proposal more. They will bring an amended version of the strategy to the table. And eventually we decide, okay, these are going to be our goals. And now everybody, based on these commonly goals that we agreed together, everybody can then decide their own actual work projects based on those goals. So that's roughly how it would look like.
Okay, so I'm going to get to, at the end, I would love to talk a little bit more about sort of the impact this has had for your teammates in terms of hiring and their engagement. But just before we go through that, like when I hear about companies who either have sort of started in this type of decentralized model or moving towards it, they've had some or sort of created some really really interesting rituals of how to communicate so that there is this shared understanding of what's happening in these decentralized models and sort of tracking how decisions are made. So they're learning from it moving forward. A lot of people have done that through written communication. Other people have done it through really dynamic use of tools like Slack to sit there and talk about that. How do you guys think about that sort of communication and decision making across the business?
Yeah, I think we have like a document, kind of like a way of working document where we which is also something that we constantly co-create, and we have certain processes so for then making proposals to that okay, we know we need to make some, but that documents things like, okay, how do we make decisions at the company, how do we make decisions on strategy, how do we make decisions on hiring, how do we make decisions on firing, which still any company ultimately also needs encounter situations where those need to be made, how do we make decisions on compensation, and then it's just like we have defined and documented that these are the processes. And then if people notice that, okay, there's something, this process could be improved, then we discuss and then we improve that process.
Okay. So you've got those defined, and does that typically lead into like to some of these processes? Does it come out, do you guys as an organization, are you big on sort of written communication to sit there and talk about how you're going to execute that? Other people I've seen have been big on sort of asynchronous videos to help people do that. What's the flavor look like for you?
I've noticed that we have both types of people at our organization. So we have the types of people who really prefer to kind of like organize their thoughts in written form and asynchronous. But then there are other people also who really prefer there to be a synchronous situation where I'm able to immediately interact and we can go back and forth. So because of that, right now, the process we have is that we lots of the final decisions are made in a synchronous meeting. So this whole company meeting that everybody can join. However, lots of the work between those meetings is done asynchronously. So, the agenda for that meeting is posted beforehand. If there's a proposal that's on the table beforehand, people can comment on that asynchronously. They can kind of like, so that like a discussion can go on asynchronously. So lots of this stuff is already being discussed before. And then finally we come together to say, okay, are we ready to make a decision? If somebody feels no, I'm not yet ready, this needs more work, then we just bring it back to the table until this discussion can be reached. So I find it really important that both types of people they have an avenue for expressing their opinion. So it's because I've noticed that if it would be only written, that would really be really challenging for people who just really prefer the synchronous communication and vice versa.
Okay. And in that role of sort of in the open meetings and when you're talking about those different forms of communication, is there any people within the business who have an ownership of the purpose? Or is that up to everyone?
Yes, that is up to everyone, I would say. So we don't have like a specific role like that. Like for sure, like I have, me and my co-founder have had like a significant role in like defining that. There was like one time when we adjusted the statement. So that statement, so the 3-word statement, it has some other additional sentences on that, which like describe more like what is it about. And so we didn't really like adjust the core meaning behind it, but we felt that, okay, if we like phrase it a bit differently, then it just like better captures like what we are actually doing. And that discussion was initiated by me, for example, but there's no reason why anybody else couldn't initiate that discussion. So that is ultimately up for us all to decide together, like if and it could be that at some point world has changed so much that it really needs to adjust to better fit the world. Maybe the platform economy as we know it doesn't really exist 10 years from now, and then it needs to be something else that is probably still aligned with the original values, but in practice the thing that we are doing will be something a bit different.
Okay, well, it's obviously kudos to you and the team that you've aligned, that you haven't had that they're all acting with the purpose in mind. I mean, that the fact that there's nothing, that there's no, that there's been no decisions and no actions that have sort of caused it to go a vote to sit there and decide whether or not this is still acting within the purpose. So that's a fantastic sort of piece around the culture of having everyone sort of moving in the right direction. So if we think about it from that employee experience, like an employee, effectively sort of they're also sort of the shared. I mean, do they have a shared ownership as well of the structure? Like, do these employees, or is it still the investors and you?
Yeah. So when it comes to the shares that have voting power, we actually made a big shift this summer, which we haven't communicated about publicly yet anywhere else. So there are more details will follow. But basically, to summarize, this was like an area that we didn't really touch when we made the transition, or we touched it in a way that basically we bought out the voting shares from our investors. And that basically meant that all voting power was returned to control of the team. But at that point, there were only 3 people at the team who had voting shares, and me and my co-founder, and then one really early team member, and who had like invested his own money at the company. And then then basically what we continued for many years is that continued to be the case. So in a way, we were like dictators when it came to voting power. So we would operate in this with this co-leadership or self-management fashion, but in practice, still there was the thing behind the scenes that still we would be able to call the shots. We would not be able to move the money to our own pockets. We had like structures in place to prevent that, but still, ultimately, we would be calling the shots. And that was not the desired state of affairs for me personally. And so early on, like we really started discussing what would it ideally mean, and then we like discussed various different alternatives and landed to the approach that we are just going to have like a one person, one vote scheme, but so that there is a threshold. So basically, you need to be employed by the company for at least 2 years. You need to go through a certain training process. Of course, you need to voluntarily say that you want to be one of the stewards, and then also like there needs to be like the official kind of like a board approval and so on. So this is something that is available for everybody. And we made this transition, and we have 21 team members today. And out of them, 19 were eligible this spring. So they had been at the company for at least 2 years. And when we asked this question, like, do you want to become a steward? Some of them thought about it long and hard. We had some really good discussions. Eventually, everybody said yes. So right now, there are 19 people who all hold exactly one voting share. And that's basically all the voting shares except one last share, which is held by the Purpose Foundation. So this is to kind of like protect our mechanism. So even if these 19 stewards would want, we cannot dismantle the structure because the foundation would veto that decision. But yeah, every other decision basically can be made by this group. So if there would be voting, it would be the whole team voting. If more than 50% of the people would think that I should resign as the CEO, then I would have to go.
Okay. And how does that align for, like, I mean, you obviously talked about the mission being the profits being distributed towards the mission. Is there any distribution of profits to those sort of people who are outside of the investors for those people, those now 19 members?
That we specifically don't have. So it was possible for people to participate in the crowdfunding round that we did. So if some people wanted to buy some money with their own money, also buy some of those shares, and many people did, so that they own small parts of those like investor shares. So eventually they will get from those shares that we turn. In addition, we had something that we called delayed compensation, basically meaning that if you had started with the company early on, before this transition, we had options and we had like shares, and we had given like some early team members promise, okay, early on you will make like a low salary, but then you have these options, and eventually they will be worth money. So we ended up converting these to like another share class. So we created a share class called D shares, and so the idea is that then after the investors have been paid back, then we will also be buying back these D shares. So again, with a predefined capped amount, but eventually some of the company's profits will be going back to these. And also we did like a similar model for people who joined after the transition, not with shares, but something like, okay, so eventually if we make enough profit, then some of that will go, that there will be kind of like this additional bonus that you'll earn because like our salaries at the time were not yet competitive enough. So since then we have achieved a situation where, okay, today our salaries are just very competitive. So we have recently given up on offering that delayed compensation. So now it's just, okay, we try to pay a good salary, but there also like is a clause in our articles of association that should be market rate salary. So we do have some process to define, okay, what is market rate for each competency. So that would be something that we can pay top of the market, but we shouldn't exceed it by an extensive amount.
Yeah, okay. And so, but in terms of your equity as well, like, is that something, are you and your sort of fellow co-founders in a similar kind of structure to the D structure, where like after you pay back investors, you guys are just going to get sort of paid out as well? So ultimately everyone's going to be in a totally equitable situation?
Yeah, exactly. So we have these. So and our pool is the biggest one. So there was a period during which we had no salary, and then during which we had a really low salary. So then our math was that for ourselves, like how would we convert our own shares into the system? And we thought that, okay, so our formula was that we started as a basis this interest that we were promising to our investors. And so basically, if you get 5x in 10 years, that's compares to like 17.5% annual interest. And then we said that, okay, we ourselves have lost this much of salary if if we would have like, instead of joining Sharetribe or starting it, if instead we would have taken like the average position, like in our industry, this much more we would have made in salary. So we have lost this. And then if we calculate that same interest for that investment, and then we ended up with like 1.9 million for both. So after tax, it's going to be something like 1.3 million. So that is the cap for me and my co-founder that we can ultimately make from the company's profits.
Very cool. Well, thank you for sharing the thinking behind that. And like, I mean, the reason why I absolutely love sort of how you guys are thinking about sort of creating a fair exit for the value that you've sort of helped to create and helping to establish these sort of 21 jobs in the local community and for yourselves. It's taken a lot of sacrifice. I mean, and the structure that you've done, I like it how it's not putting any undue risks on the business. I mean, I think sort of that's what we've seen in quite a few models of employee ownership in the US and the UK, is that they can be quite extractive, right, in terms of, and can put the business under stress. I mean, there are also a lot of owners. You hear a lot of great stories coming out of the UK and the EOT where people sort of having a deferred payment schedule over the next of sort of a period of 5, 7, 10, 12 years. Like, these sort of longer schedules obviously aren't as onerous on the business, but they're still not as flexible, not as profit, like genuinely incentive aligned, like what you've done. So yeah, kudos to you for doing that. How's the process been of taking the employees on this journey to this new mode of ownership and structure?
I think it's been really interesting. Of course, there has been multiple steps already back in 2014, 2015, like when we started for the first time, we had enough money to hire several team members. So it was not just us co-founders. Already at that point, we recognized this thing that, okay, we don't really want to create the traditional hierarchy. So from early on, like it really emerged that, okay, we are anyway going to be discussing things through together, like making decisions together. Like really often we were always been like a relatively small team, no more than 20 plus people. So we would have, there's always been that opportunity to just all go to the same room and discuss. So that has been there from the early on. So then when we did the 2018 like transition, that was like a really big discussion, and we had like several all hands sessions with everybody at the company. We said that, okay, me and Antti feel that this is the right way for us to go. How do you feel about that? Some people were really excited. Some people had some doubts, and then ultimately it was not like unanimous that okay, everybody really wants that. So people were not sure, and that was really like a call that me and Antti made together. That, okay, at this point, this is we are gonna make this call. And after that, like maybe 6 to 12 months later, like some people who were most skeptical came to me and said like, okay, actually now I really realize what this thing is about. So this was actually amazing. So ultimately I think that people really started appreciating that, especially when it had been done. And also like after that, when we hire people, of course there are some people to whom like this would make no sense probably, like they are like, okay, why are you capping capping your return and my return as like a team member who would potentially like become rich from an exit. But I also think that that's a really great filter. So it filters out the people who are just not the right fit for our culture, which is what you want when you're hiring. Like you want people who are aligned with your values, what you're trying to do in the world. And I really and I think that has also helped us really like in our hiring. So we managed to build a culture so that now that we did this transition where actually finally the voting share and like voting power was transitioned, we had people who had really thought this through and really wanted to be part of this and already had a certain sense of ownership over the company.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And what's attrition been like within the business over the years?
I was just thinking of like, I think we had like a figure calculating the average tenure. I think it's something like 8+ years, something like that at this point. So the very little. I think the last time somebody left voluntarily was more than 2 years ago, I think, and so this happens relatively rarely. So there are plenty of people who have been for 10+ years, and like so, which is like for a small company like ours, like to me at least, like that is one testimony saying that okay, we've done something right. And when people come and they say that okay, I don't really want to leave because this is there are not that many other companies that have the same structure and the same things that we have.
Yeah, this is Look, this has been incredibly insightful and look, I think really inspiring for hopefully for me and hopefully for the people in the audience around trying to sort of solve for aligning your business with your purpose and bringing a team along with that journey too. I mean, you've obviously made some sacrifices to make that happen, but also you're also demonstrating sort of how you can actually make that not so much a sacrifice, but also just a compromise with regards to timing and how that happens and creating a really sort of open and democratic sort of a place for people to work. And it sounds like a really inspiring journey.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, before we go, we typically ask our guests three questions in a fast round, right? So I offer you these three questions, and you just provide a quick response. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay. So we're gonna have to slightly adapt them, I think, because with the sort of your approach around steward ownership. But I mean, who is the leader that you most admire with regards to, I guess, these alternative ownership structures?
Who is the leader that I most admire? I would have to say the founder of like a Dutch organization. His name is now escaping me, but basically the organization is called Buurtzorg. And it's an organization of more than 10,000 home nurses, and they are managing the organization in like a basically self-managed way. So there's no real like a hierarchy or anything. And then the role of him as a leader has been more like to hold the space for like allowing people to take power in their own hands. And they were chosen as the best employer in Netherlands as like an organization of basically of home care, which is not the easiest thing to kind of like build a great environment, but they managed to do that, and that they were chosen several years in a row. So I think they really achieved something special.
I'll put a link to them. I've known that
Joost de Blok
organization.
is the name of the person. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Well done for getting there. But I'll put a link as well for them in the show notes for those people who want to explore it further. What would be your favorite resource on on employee ownership or alternative ownership?
So they are So in terms of like employee ownership, definitely all resources about steward ownership. So that the folks at Purpose are Purpose Network, Purpose Foundation. They are developing this model forward. So I think their website, which you can also link to the show notes, is the best way to go. So they don't have there's no like one big book that would be the Bible of this thing. They are more like various case studies and reports, and that you can use based on your exact needs. Also, there are different resources for different types of organizations. So that would be one thing. Then separately, when this goes more into the whole self-management and co-leadership, there's a book called Reinventing Organizations, which has been like a big inspiration for us. That was written already in 2014. And Buurtzorg is one of the organizations mentioned in that book as example. That was written by Frederic Laloux, and that has been like a big inspiration in many ways for me.
Okay, that's a new one for me, so I'll definitely be reading that. And then finally, what would you say to a business owner who's sitting on the fence regarding a transition to either employee ownership or a purpose trust structure?
Well, I cannot tell them what is the right decision to do, because I think that the most important advice I can give with any business owner is that you need to figure out what are your own values, what are the things that you most want out of life, not what others tell you should want, but what you really want for yourself. And then you should design your organization like around those goals and around those values. And for me, that has been the thing that we've done. And to me, that is the single best decision that we've done as a company.
Fantastic. Juho, thank you very much for joining us. I mean, if people wanted to learn more about Sharetribe and you, where can people go to learn more?
Yes, so you can, of course, go to our website, share.com, and then if you are interested in building your own marketplace business, you can learn more about our product there. If you want to learn more about our structure, our approach, then our blog, sharetribe.com/balanced, where we also talk about our thoughts on balanced life and balanced work life, among other things, is the place where we write about steward ownership and all these things. So In addition, you can follow me on LinkedIn. That's usually where I rant about working life and ownership and all these types of things. So you'll find some good stuff there.
Okay, at the end, we'll have links to those in the show notes. But Juho, thank you so much for sharing a really inspiring story of how you've worked through the challenges.
Yeah, thanks a lot. This was lots of fun. Thanks for having me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you want to continue learning about employee ownership as an alternative exit, head across to abettermonday.me for additional links and resources. You can also make sure to subscribe or follow along in your favorite podcast app, and be sure to leave us a 5-star review.